East Atlanta with no maps. Stay on the fresh that teach up like a traffic jam. I'm supposed to pay that girl like
Oh, no, 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 no.
If there is anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible, who still wonders if the dream of our founders is alive in our time, who still questions the power of our democracy, tonight is your answer. The answer told by lines that stretched around schools and churches. It's the answer spoken by young and old, rich and poor, Democrat and Republican, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, gay, straight, disabled and not disabled, Americans who send a message to the world that we have never been just a collection of individuals or a collection of red states and blue states. We are and always will be the United States of America. It's been a long time coming. Because of what we did on this day, in this election, at this defining moment, change has come to America.
Does racism still exist?
That is a large question.
My personal problem is never solved as long as the problem is not solved for all of our people in this country.
5 score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today.
July 2nd, 1964, Martin Luther King stood behind President
signed the Emancipation Proclamation. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free.
Photographer! He's a photographer!
When I think of the problem of racism, I think of it in really two different ways. One way is at an individual level, in which certainly there are people out there who have racist attitudes and engage in racist kinds of behavior. They have fairly, terrible views of people of other races and ethnicities. And so those are the folks that we are, easily able to identify. They're people like the folks we see in organizations like the Ku Klux Klan and the neo-Nazis, for example. But I think society also suffers from something that's even more devastating, which is a much more systemic form of racism that exists in our society.
On a daily basis, I think it's observable. As a sociologist, the way it plays out in every institution in terms of the way we treat groups of people differently, the way we interact with people and differently on the basis of their race and gender and sexual orientation. If you mean on a big scale institutionally, I think, economic inequality, political inequality, inequality of power, and resources.
And it permeates our various institutions, whether it's the criminal justice system, the educational system.
Microaggressions to the structural inequalities in education and income, wealth, things that really matter in American society. We see it really in every statistic from the cradle to the grave, from infant mortality rate to incarceration rates to people impacted by police brutality to life expectancy.
You know, and those things are much more difficult to uproot. They tend to be things that operate in a very subtle way. They operate in a very systemic way. And in fact, many things that you tend to think are functioning well or functioning normally tend to do things that result in disparate or unequal sort of racial impacts.
Never left. Yeah, it never left. I think the United States was built on the backs of people of color, and then the tools that they use to keep it secure is white supremacy. Therefore, the foundations of this country is white supremacy. And if the foundations is white supremacy and it's built on genocide and it's built on the backs of people of color, when did race ever really, wasn't never really important? When did racism leave? When did racism end? Never.
I've studied, written, and taught about racism in the United States for my entire career, which is about 3 decades now. And, you know, the evidence is legion.
I remember my aunt broke her foot and we were like going to get sandwiches from, I think it was a 7-Eleven or something down the street, and this black SUV drives by in the middle of the night and they were like, "Fuck you, niggers." And I was like, I just want a sandwich. Like, I don't understand why this is so important. And I mean, they never like stopped, so it wasn't like they were really all that, clearly weren't that pressed.
People talk about it as like, this is what this happened here, you know, we can move on. No, we cannot. This is one of many examples. And what we need to really face is the reality of the fact that systemic racism does exist. And it can happen in very clear ways, and it can happen in very subtle ways.
I don't think they know it's still there. Like, I don't think they realize they're still doing it as much. Some of them do, don't get me wrong. But I think there's a genuine portion of the population that doesn't know they're still racist.
There are many instances where I've experienced racism. It might not necessarily be overt and more so covert, but I do experience microaggressions on a daily basis.
I actually prefer the term everyday racism because I think microaggression to me downplays things a little bit. The idea of a microaggression is that it's something that's more subtle in terms of leaving someone out, in terms of very sort of subtly denigrating them. Sometimes the kinds of interactions that you can do that treat somebody in a racially different way, but that you could almost walk back and say, I didn't mean it, or I didn't intend to. So it's the kind of subtle, and then there are parts of everyday racism that are not so subtle.
Microaggression can be an attitude, a stereotype, a comment, or an aggressive action or behavior that could be directed towards you based off of your race, sexual orientation, and other things that would classify you into an identity or a social group.
Psychologists like to call the term microaggressions. I'm not necessarily fond of that term because I think after a while microaggressions, when they happen so often, they're not micro anymore, they're cumulative. But I have had experiences before where people have really sort of questioned the ways in which, like, do I work hard enough for tenure, or do I just get a pass because I'm a Latina, right? Or just like things they've said to me about, well, you obviously could ask for more salary because of course they're going to pay you more, right? This whole idea. So things like that, sometimes it's just kind of hard to record keep all of that, and you don't do it, you just move on.
I've dealt with a lot of microaggressions, especially in my professional life and in my social life. being one of very few women of African descent in my community that I live in now in Western Mass. A lot of hair touching and, speaking about my dialect, asking me to speak, Ebonics, AAVE for them.
I've gotten the oh, I think you're great and I would date you, but I don't really like black girls. And I was like, okay. But on the flip side, I've also gotten I don't like black people, but you're okay. I'm not racist, I just don't like black people, but you're okay.
And again, that's not unique. I belong to a group of scholars who talk about their everyday experiences, and so what I realize, and there are also people who talk about this presumed incompetent. There's a book out there, and what the book relates is that my experience is not unique.
And as a system, of course, systemic racism is not going anywhere. It's alive and well.
Ooh.
What you got good with this one? Why?
No.
Yes. No.
I don't think so at all. And it was more than one word.
Well, to me, that would depend on the definition of racism.
Wow. I would say yes.
I guess I'd have to say yes.
Yeah.
No! Whew, I know some really ally AF white people. Just down for the cause, here for it, slap up some other white people for being foolish, just ready for it, Absolutely not. I think it's something that's learned. I think it's something that can be unlearned.
Just like Nina was saying before, there's a system in place that kind of works itself. I think racism, it doesn't have to be the image of the KKK throwing torches at houses, but racism comes in different forms.
Obviously I think that there are white people who try to understand it. I wouldn't classify white people as all of them under one umbrella. That's generalizations. I think that there are definitely critical white scholars who deal with race and try to understand it and unpack it.
I think to be a racist, that is a fundamental of you. That's part of your foundation. That's a characteristic. That's a personality trait. I don't think all white people are racist, because that would just be absurd to me, because I know white people who are not racist, and the definition of all immediately means that's not true.
But I think that overall, oftentimes what I've seen from liberal whites, and these are usually the people that I encounter the most, I gotta say, I don't really come across people who are conservative. I would kind of be afraid of them. And also because I'm here at this institution, I think, so the people that I do come across are liberal whites, and I do think that they are colorblind, right? And so that to me is a really good example of how sometimes they are so colorblind that they do not see their privilege, and because of that they exert racism.
Sometimes, well, a lot of the time it can be very harmful, and some of the time it can be, unbeknownst to them, and they might not even realize the things that they do.
For me, I think it's impossible, I shouldn't say hard, to live in this country and not have prejudicial ideas in your head. But not because you're a horrible person, or not because you came up with them on your own, although some people do, but because they surround us everywhere. It's everywhere in the media, the news. To not have them somewhere floating in your head, I think is impossible, unless you lived in a bubble, which we don't. But whether all white people act on those in a way, again, a sociological way that I would say is discriminatory, which means that it's harmful or hurts the chances of success of people of color, then no, I don't think all white people do that, but probably way more do that than think they do it.
The definition has lost meaning. And so, are there white people who who are beneficiaries of racism? Yes, definitely. That system has benefited many whites. Are there black people who can subscribe to racist ideology, concepts bred in white supremacy? Yes.
I think for a white person, or a person without color, as I like to say, in American society, to say they're not racist is inconsequential. I mean, I like to consider myself anti-racist, but I live in a racist society. I benefit from that racist society. So for me to say I'm not a racist, to me has no meaning.
There's different levels, different branches of racism, different versions of racism that benefit white people. And even though they don't think they are being racist or prejudiced or bigoted, there is still a system in place that is for them. It's to help them. And they might not think that they play a role in it, but they do. So when it comes to that, when you look at the structure part of it, yes.
So I think it's also understanding that whiteness is not an actual thing. It's a way of behavior. It's a thing that's taught. It's not a culture. You can be Irish, you can be German. Those are cultures. Whiteness is not a culture. It's a set of behaviors that's taught to us. And because of how the structure is, especially in the United States, I'll speak just for the United States. The structure is in the United States. The whiteness becomes a way of how we treat people who are white and how people who are white treat those who are not, subconsciously. And until you learn how to not do that, then racism, all white people will be racist, because it's not, the education for how to not do that is not the same.
Them flags just fly for 30, 40, 50 years, 100 years from now. They can't touch it.
What does that flag mean to you?
It means 100%. It means I got my own property and nobody can tell me what to do with it. I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry one bit.
For what happened in Charleston? Okay.
Everything that is mine is property. Nobody else.
I'm not asking about the house. I'm just saying your reaction to when you saw what happened in Charleston.
Oh no, I won't worry about it. That was my business.
Okay.
That's what them guys done out there, what they done. Whatever that guy killed, he was in the Confederate jail. Sending messages.
Yeah, do you want to send them? What is the message that all those flags send?
Well, all you got to do if you're going on that business like the TV station and stuff like that, you tell them Confederate people down there in Florida or all over the United States to tell the blacks to stay where they want to be and not stay where I want to be. Because that ain't nothing that belongs to them.
He a racist, you know what I'm saying, this and that, this and that. I don't know him personally to say that.
That's exactly right.
Every time I seen him, you know what I'm saying, he walk past the house, he speak. I speak, he throw his hand up, sometimes he don't say nothing. You know what I'm saying, but it's a mutual thing.
They sound like the United States flag. People have complained about that.
So what you're saying, you don't have a problem with him personally, you just don't have it.
I don't know him personally to have a problem with him personally.
But the flag does offend you, but you don't have a problem with him.
Yeah. I mean, I ain't gonna lie to you, the flags do offend me, but I don't have no problem with this man. That's his right to put up whatever he wants to put up on his own property.
But he got it right.
But they offend me. Yeah, I ain't gonna lie to you, say it don't. But we live in a society where people could do what they want to do.
Many also do cocaine. Yes, the Confederate flag is racist. Is my crackhead neighbor on drugs? Yes. Yes, I see these things online. Talking, no, it's not. It's history. Yeah, it is history. I don't understand the question. The history is racist. It represents the Confederate flag. I'm not a historian, so guys, please don't kill me. But stop me if I'm wrong. Wasn't the Confederate flag designed as like a big fuck you to the actual flag? So the whole point of the Confederate flag was like, now we don't bang with y'all, my G. We're gonna have this whole thing of slaves, bang bang, gang gang, slaves, we out here. So to defend an entity that it was solely built on racism, you know, you can argue the American flag's the same way, but I can name a lot of positive things about the American flag. I proudly served the American flag when I was in the United States Air Force.
That man can put up 1,000,000 flags and it doesn't bother me.
What's that?
He can put up 1,000,000 flags and it doesn't bother me. Those are his flags, that's his property. I live over here. It's in the mind of the blacks. If that's what it is, in the mind of the blacks, this man don't bother no one.
Like Barack Obama is the president of the United States. He got elected by people. Okay, well, he got them flags up there. It's got them stars on it. That's the same thing, them flags right there. But the black people wants to try to take it off to clear them up.
The Confederate flag, I don't even understand, really. Like, I've never seen anyone at any point in history fly a flag after they lost. Like, it doesn't quite make sense to me.
I think outside of a history museum, the Confederate flag is racist. I think within the context of history and you're explaining what happened during the Civil War period and the Confederacy, then yes, it can be a non-racist symbol. But outside of that, if you're using it for personal use and brandishment, then you are racist.
Yes, it was about making sure that the South didn't secede, but the reasons why the South wanted to pull away from the North, that's what makes the Confederate flag racist.
And so when we think about the people who fought that war on the side of the South, certainly many of them were pulled into this war. Many of the folks who were on the ground level, who were in the trenches and who were fighting, who were sort of sucked into this war by, leaders who dominated the South. But without a doubt, the people who were calling the shots, who led the campaigns, who sort of drew up the plans to execute this war, who seceded from the Union, who were political leaders. These folks, in my mind, were traitors to the United States of America, and if they were alive today, they'd either be in prison or they'd be court-martialed and hung.
And it's not just racist, it's un-American. When you kind of put the Confederate flag up on this pedestal, yes, it's part of history, but at the same time, what history are you honoring?
People that put up a Confederate flag are not doing it for the history, despite what they say, because your history is trash. Like, you were tactically not good enough, you failed, you lost. Why would you celebrate that?
I think also we could tie in like the groups that use the flag to promote their ideologies. The various groups, because it's not only one, and even the various individuals. I think also that goes, the Confederate flag goes hand in hand with the Don't Tread on Me flag.
Mm-hmm.
And how the connotations behind these things and the stories behind these things and the symbolism that it has.
Symbols represent not just culture but also cultural narratives. So when we uphold people that are slaveholders, or we uphold signs that somehow celebrate a slave past, that's dangerous.
And certainly there are things about Southern culture that deserve to be celebrated, but I don't think that's the flag under which to celebrate those kind of positive contributions to American culture. And so anybody who says that it isn't racist, I think just wants an excuse for their own racism, I guess.
When a lot of people say this is just part of who we are, well, who was that? Who was that? Who created that history? We have a lot of misinterpretations of historical facts because oftentimes there's still work to be done about like slavery and slave narratives and that, and it makes sense because they didn't record that kind of stuff, right? Like, so if you visit plantation museums, you hear the perspective of the plantation owners. You don't hear the perspective of the slaves. And a lot of it is because we know that time and time again, right, the dominant voice has been the one that gets immersed into historical accounts of what we know, which is why oftentimes we always see our heroes as heroes, but if we look at them, we realize no, they were slaveholders and they were invested in the economy, and they actually did rape women and they got away with a lot of stuff, and yet we still say that they're heroes. So to me, that all of that really uncovers the fact that we have problems that a lot of people are very proud of and call history.
And I think what a lot of people are forgetting about when they say that this is our history, this is our heritage, you're asking us to hide it, is that the Confederate flag really was resurrected in the 1950s and 1960s when the civil rights movement began to emerge. It in some ways became a symbol of resistance to the civil rights movement. You started seeing more Confederate flags being waved.
Black History Month you find ridiculous. Why? You're going to relegate my history to a month? Oh, come on. What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? No, well, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism?
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman.
I think that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in the last 30 days.
No, that sounds dumb. I'm so sorry.
Who said that? Morgan Freeman.
If we don't talk about it, if it makes it worse, or if we talk about it, it makes it worse.
If we talk about it, it makes it worse.
We don't talk about it enough.
If we didn't talk about why people keep, getting sick and dying, they'd just keep getting sick and dying, and no one would be like, well, maybe it's this and maybe it's that. I think conversation is the quickest way to a solution, because you have as many minds as possible trying to figure out, the root of the issue.
Morgan Freeman is a token black, and he benefits from white money. All of his movies are predominantly white viewership based. I think it's in Morgan Freeman's benefit to make comments like that, and I think it's absolutely incorrect to think that the discussion of racism and issues of marginalized people perpetuates the issue further. It absolutely does not. It educates people, it raises awareness, and it can lead to changing minds and critical thinking of others before they make ignorant actions and comments.
Let's not talk about it? What are you saying? Let's not talk about it so it doesn't make the white people uncomfortable? Because that's what I hear when somebody says, like, my ex-girlfriend, I used to purposely not talk about stuff because I didn't want to bring it up. That doesn't mean that it didn't exist. So, no, that's not true on either way. Like, it's, talking about it makes it worse, which is a very strange thing to say for an educated journalist. And let's stop talking about it is a strange thing for a black man to say, period. But when you're worth all that money, sometimes it gets to your head.
I like Morgan Freeman as an actor, but I think that's a completely ridiculous statement. That's like saying we could stop cancer by not talking about it, or we could make the problem with North Korea go away by not talking about it. That doesn't, we could make climate change disappear by not talking about it. And I know that's something that's often leveled towards people like myself who study racism in American society. If it wasn't for us talking about it, teaching about it, that the problem would disappear. And I vehemently disagree that unless you name a problem, you can't address it. You can't begin to change it.
I think the more we talk about it, and I think the more we talk about it with a critical thought and a critical view, then we could start, I don't even want to say change, but not even
we can start the start of change.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think he is very unaware of the fact that empirically, right, racism does exist, and there is plenty of evidence that suggests that it happens throughout every institution in our society. So the less we talk about it, the easier it is for us to accept it.
And if you kick enough things under the rug, you can trip over it. And I think that was kind of represented in this past year's election. Because, like, as Jordan Peele said, part of the reason why he wrote Get Out is because we were living in this, like, post-racial lie where people kind of didn't talk about the way they felt about race. And it kind of lulled us into this state of thinking that things were all better, you know, since Barack Obama was elected president. But I don't think that things get better or go away if you just don't talk about them.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems about racial inequality is that we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about it honestly enough. We don't talk about it openly enough.
It's always that elephant in the room. And then whenever you bring it up, it's always like, why do you always want to talk about race? And it's like, I don't always want to talk about race. It's that race has become the center of everything, of what is given to you. If you even get food, if you even get to sleep, if you even get housing, and what type of housing do you get, what type of education do you get? You know, it's the center of everything in the United States.
Same way that some people say we shouldn't have racial categories on the census or keep racial data. If we stop keeping racial data, it wouldn't change what's happening in terms of differential incarceration. It wouldn't change what's happening in terms of profiling. It wouldn't change what's happening, say, in terms of unequal education in the greater Hartford area. It just means we wouldn't have the data to name it and to talk about it.
Exact opposite of that. I think that we don't talk enough about race. We don't talk enough about class. We don't talk enough about LGBTQ issues. We don't talk enough about gender inequality in our country. And as a result of that, we live under the illusion that these problems have either gone away or they're not as bad as we really think they are. And so certainly when we see what's been going on with Harvey Weinstein in Hollywood and the number of women who are coming out and talking about being sexually harassed or sexually assaulted, it tells you that really in many ways Weinstein represents the sort of an extreme example of what is really the tip of the iceberg of a problem that is very deeply rooted in our society and something that has been normalized, that people have been able to easily overlook and pretend that it's not as bad as what it actually is. And so I think the problem of racism and discrimination falls into a similar category, is that people are quick to dismiss, you know, when people stand up and say that things have happened to them, and we dismiss it by saying, it's just one bad apple, you know, as opposed to something that is really a reflection of something that's much more systemic, much more deeply rooted.
I would question also what kind of people are Morgan Freeman talking to. Just because, like you said, we don't talk about it enough, and because of that reason, it will be uncomfortable for people. It is to call out what has happened in history, what's still happening now. It can be uncomfortable for certain people, for all people, because it's not a comfortable conversation. It's not meant to be. We have to get past feeling guilt or hurt or ashamed or feeling like someone's blaming you. It's just, we have to just push past it. And I think with Morgan Freeman saying that, I would wonder if he is speaking to the right people.
I also would like to chime in and say, when we look at the person who's saying it, Morgan Freeman, he has money. He's rich. And with the money comes a lot of power. And with money, sometimes it creates white consciousness where you think that, you know, you broke the glass ceiling because you are a person of color who achieved this American dream that's really not a real thing. And then when you have a person like Morgan Freeman make statements like that, and then you look at his economical standing and his success, I think that plays a role in that as well.
Police brutality in my own words.
Police brutality for me is when police officers overstep their authorities, their authority, and use physical violence.
I'd say police brutality is when police overstep the bounds of what their office is supposed to be and go against what their function is, and that is to protect people.
Police brutality encompasses for me any excessive aggressive force, with the capacity for blunt trauma towards a person or loss of life that is avoidable by proper protocol or clear direction or conversation.
The situation could be diverted or de-escalated, but instead you decide to just go all out, just like wail on somebody for no reason, or pull out a gun when clearly you could have just talked to them.
I think police brutality doesn't always have to be physical and violent. I think words can be just as violent, and attitudes and actions and your response efforts can be just as detrimental as you hitting somebody who is Black or Latino or Asian. Police brutality isn't just extended to the Black community, but I also think that people need to understand that the aggressions of a police officer, period, goes outside of their job description. They're supposed to be of the people, for the people. They're public servants. They're supposed to help you, not attack you, not harass you, not confront you. And they haven't even gathered all the facts.
Police brutality is a targeted problem, especially as it relates to people of color, but almost exclusively Black people in this country. And it extends, however, to poor communities of all races. And it is an issue that should not be cloaked by conversations about blue lives. You know, being a blue life is a choice. Being born Black or Latino is not a choice. Often being born poor is not a choice. You know, so that targeting is real.
We should also be aware and knowledgeable that sadly racism continues to exist in this country. We have made progress, and I'm proud of that. You're proud of that. But when we look at names like Sandra Bland, that what we want is a nation where a young Black man or woman can walk down the street not worried about being falsely arrested or beaten or shot.
Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter.
I first heard about Black Lives Matter after Trayvon Martin.
Sandra Bland died.
All right, baby.
For something stupid.
Yeah. Come on, baby. Give it
She
up.
died for something stupid.
Give it up. Yeah.
Why?
I'm not a fan of social media activism. I'm not a fan of thumb activism.
Boys killed him in his high school. They rolled him up in a mess. And then nobody did anything about it. They just let it go.
I think Black Lives Matter is one of the most important social movements, certainly of this new century, the 21st century, but certainly one of the most important social movements since the Civil Rights Movement.
The Civil Rights Movement did not do enough. We are at a different point in our society where we need to continue more of that work.
Who was Andy Lopez?
Andy Lopez was a 12-year-old boy in Santa Rosa who was shot dead by police. He was holding a BB gun.
I think Black Lives Matter had a lot of potential as an organization and as a movement. However, I think that the way that protesting and activism is today within the Black community and heavily based in social media, I think that the power of Black Lives Matter has been extremely diluted. And I think that there was a lot more that everybody could have done, and it's not all on the organizers or the main leadership of Black Lives Matter to facilitate. I think it was the followship that just didn't bring it in the way that was necessary.
Will you still do it if there were no retweets involved, if there were no selfies involved, if there were no apparel involved?
A lot of the argument against Black Lives Matter is because people don't understand where it's coming from. There's also the issue of all lives matter, and it's like, yes, they do. That's exactly our point, is that they all matter, so come on.
All has tended to mean white, and I think whenever we said all, we generally meant white people. When we said we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal, we really meant all white men.
You need to be more restrictive as to who you let rep your squad.
I do appreciate what they're doing, and I don't think that, the outliers or people who are like rioting and looting, I don't think that they are representative of all of Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter does not mean white lives don't, or other lives don't, or blue lives don't.
If all of them matter, why are the black bodies being targeted in that way if they all matter? I think I want to send a message not only like to the black community, but to the Latino community, to the white community, to every other community that's out there about Black Lives Matter, is that nobody's telling you that your life doesn't matter. When we think about policing and we think about the structure of the police system in the United States, the origins of it was to bring back slaves to their masters. I think that people always want to deny that part. So then when you think about policing and you think about all these things, the group that they've always been targeting since the very beginning has always been black.
It's led by young people. It's led by both men and women. It's led by people who are LGBTQ. I mean, there's sort of a range of folks who are at the leadership of this movement, and they're really pushing for reforms in our country at a very sort of deep level. They've challenged a lot of the older generation of civil rights leaders to sort of modernize their tactics, modernize their thinking.
Having kind of like a leaderless movement, and where like the leaders really become sort of like the local people.
When you say, oh, all lives matter, or Latinos are also being killed by the police and stuff like that, it's like, I understand that, but let's go back in history and let's see where the real problem is. Because this didn't just happen in 2014, 2013, 2012. This is more than 200 years.
That was a movement primarily led by men. This is a movement that's primarily led by women. That was a movement in which people who were LGBTQ were pushed to the margins, like Bayard Rustin. Today you see men and women who are LGBTQ are in the front of this movement. And so in that sense, it's a very positive step and represents a very dramatic shift.
I think that's also important to note. This is not something that is new. It hasn't like just come out. Suddenly Black Lives Matter. This has been a continuation of movements for centuries. I think that's also the issue. That people, when they get offended by Black Lives Matter, is that they don't realize that this is a continuation, not a new thing.
I'm not asking you to please stop killing me.
Black people are people and deserve to be treated as people.
Well, show me the ugly child. And why is she the ugly child?
Because she's black.
Actually, all my life I felt ugly because of my dark complexion.
It's something that affects me in almost every aspect of life.
Just wanted to be just 3-4 shades lighter. Like, I literally felt like that would be the solution.
When I had my own show, I used to tan 3 or 4 times a week in a tanning bed to get darker. I did.
Over the years of excessive tanning, I developed skin damage called melasma, which is here on my forehead. I also have dark spots above my lips.
People forget to go under their eyes, and there's like, you have the raccoon eyes because everywhere around your face is lighter than your eyes. So try and get as close around the eyes as you can.
And that people are willing to walk around looking like aliens, like some ghastly creature from a Steven Spielberg movie, and that is, they prefer that over their God-given color.
Yes, colorism is real. I think it's something that is now sort of being addressed by It's by black women. I don't know how it works with black men.
Light skin versus dark skin. We see a lot in social media. We see a lot of it in, things like love and hip hop. We see it a lot in things like Bring It On. We see it a lot even in Orange Is the New Black. Things like that, and pop culture in general.
I appear less threatening than like a darker skinned man. You know what I'm saying?
It's a symptom
of colorism and racism, and
it hurts a bit more because it's very specific.
The closer you are to white, the closer that it's presumed that you're sort of better.
Decades upon decades, it was said, it started way back, in the slave times.
One thing that disappoints me and upsets me is when people always try to give the narrative of slavery, house versus field niggas. Let's drop it. Right here in contemporary 2017, colorism is instituted not just in the black community, it goes beyond the black community. It is every community. Everybody is out here selling skin creams to lighten themselves. Whether you look at the Asians in the umbrellas underneath the sun, to the Indians in the hair beauty supply shops trying to push lightening creams, to each other, to us, everybody is out here looking for this porcelain skin for a reason. There's benefits.
I think that the most dangerous forms of racisms are the ones that are not blatant.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the most dangerous because those are the most easiest to miss.
More women who are dark skinned, but that doesn't mean I like dark skinned girls. I just love black women who are gorgeous. I've never picked and choose. Oh, you light. Let me make some light skinned babies. That's ignorance.
And it's sort of like every barrier broken, like, Hollywood people, black people that got into Hollywood, whatever. A lot of those barriers are broken first by light-skinned people and then by darker-skinned people. Interracial marriages broken by a light-skinned person.
If you love Christina, be with Christina. But don't be with Christina just to spite, I'm not going to say it, stereotypical black name, I'll get crucified for that, but despite the black girl.
If it's a soul for a soul and you truly love this person beyond what's going on with how they look physically, and that goes for any type of relationship, great, that's beautiful, that's healthy. What's unhealthy is the fetishing of somebody's skin color, the fetishing of somebody's white privilege, the fetishing of the possibility that you can have a mixed baby, and that's your aspiration and goal for getting into this relationship.
And it shows up in odd ways, this fascination with mixed babies online, this not even fascination, a fetishization of it. And it keeps going. We don't understand why we're doing it or what's making us want to do that.
Or even thinking that the cure to racism is mixed children.
Yeah.
Or interracial couples. These are all forms of colorism.
No, there's nothing wrong with her. It's just black women are strong and they're only attracted to strong men. Only a weak man says black women are too rough.
Even people who look indigenous, like as you know, like Latin American, we have all kinds of looks, right? And so even people who look indigenous, will oftentimes say like that they experience a different, reception or.
We need to place a premium on lighter skin by retouching and photoshopping the skin of actresses of color before putting them on the cover of magazines.
But there's a privilege within being light-skinned, and I think that needs to be acknowledged.
Like, there's a way of sort of passing and being accepted the closer that you are to being white.
Mm-hmm. And passing, for those who might not know, is a person of color that could pass as a white person. And people don't realize that is actually a symptom of the symptom of colorism. So, you have black people who are passing. You have Latino people who are passing. You have other people of color who are passing.
Example of this is the paper bag test. This test took place in the 20th century in many African American upper class social institutions, such as sororities, fraternities, churches, and other types of social events.
If you were lighter than the brown paper bag, then you was considered beautiful, smart. You passed that test. If you were darker than that, then you were considered dark and unattractive.
When I applied to Fisk University, you had to have a photograph.
Since the United States has a lot of different people from a lot of different parts of the world, the concept of race is not the same.
Mm-hmm.
So you have places like Latin America where the main concept of race is colorism. And when, we're all put in the same place, certain forms of racism could be perpetuated because that's the racism they've ever known. Like, there are people that come from different countries and they can't wrap their head around white supremacy, a structured form of racism. Like, they can't wrap it. Like, to them, it's either you're not pulling yourself from your bootstraps, like it's your issue. You're the reason why you are in segregated housing, or you're on welfare or whatever.
Like Black women, but like only between like shades of like Halle Berry to like,
I might get better treatment because I am a fair-skinned Latina versus my cousins or uncles who are probably of a darker complexion. And I think, because I see it in my family, and again, it comes from my family, from my community, and that changes context. Versus, I've had white people say, I don't care, I want a Latina, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Ignorant for dark-skinned women to publicly attack women who are light-skinned for no reason.
It really depends on the people that are perpetuating the colorism in that moment. Because like I said, when it comes to things like that, when you hear phrases like that, when like, darker the berries or the juice, they're not talking about a light-skinned Black woman or they're not talking about a light-skinned Black man.
I disagree.
Okay.
If you're stuck up, if you're bougie, that's because that's your personality trait.
And looking at that spectrum thing, the thing about colorism that is who is pushing closer to the accepted view of what it should be, what is normal, which is white for the most part.
And then women say this to me all the time, well, you weren't growing up. When I was growing up, the boy said I was ugly and went with the light-skinned girl. That's because he's a fucking asshole. What does that have to do with that? My sister and my nieces are light brights. It looked like that lamp. So with that being said, you think I'm gonna let you call my sister a bitch?
That power dynamic would still lie in being able to be as close as you can to whiteness, or looking close as you can to passing.
And to say that dark-skinned women bully light-skinned women is the same as saying that Black women oppress Black men. There's a reason for the reaction. Up until this point, before colorism was even a phrase, a term, and acknowledged, millions of Black women experienced oppression based off of the fact that they weren't lighter.
Because when I was coming through the white lens. Because white people tend to do that a little bit more often, where it's like they want to get that full Black experience, therefore they're gonna pick somebody who's dark skinned.
When I started dating and I would tell girls, I don't really like the weed, they would flip out on me and be like, oh, you only like them pretty light-skinned girls with long hair? Huh? 16, 17, 18, that didn't make any sense to me. I'm just like, huh? What does that have to do with, you just named attributes.
When you look at all the magazines, all media throughout history, the representative for Black women is light-skinned women. Down to Diana Ross, down to, some could even say Beyonce, Alicia Keys. The list goes on and on and on. And those are the people who are phrased as the good ones. Like they're not as attitudinal. They have a lighter personality. They're more easygoing. They're more easier to deal with. And then you have a bunch of rappers talking about, like, I want me a red bone.
It's weird because it works into the subconscious.
Yeah.
That person who chose the lighter person may not have done that knowing why they were doing it. Something that just, again, it happens when we're young until we recognize it later that, oh, that wasn't cool of me, or it was, shouldn't have done that. It goes both ways, even going with the light skin, dark skin debate. Part of that is internalized hurt and hate because we have been told that this is what you should be, and you realize that you are never going to be that, and there's no way that you can be that, and so we perpetuate that in different forms.
Y'all need to chill, and I'm not talking about the women who think they're better than you because they're light skinned. I'm with you. Let's get the pitchfork. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm with you. I'm only talking about stop calling these girls bitches because she's light skinned and you're dark skinned. I love my little sexy chocolate chips. Holla at me.
I remember my eldest sister is lighter than me, and I remember feeling a lot of hurt towards her, a lot of anger towards her that wasn't her fault. And again, now that I'm older, I can understand why I was feeling that way. And especially when we're talking about children. Children do not know how to process their emotions like adults should be able to. It kind of means that we also have to kind of not let go of what happened to us in our childhood, but address it and understand why it could have happened, and understanding the power dynamics of it.
Lil Wayne, perfect example. He said in an interview that he would never have another dark-skinned child. He would only have babies with Spanish or white women, or a light-skinned black woman. So when he procreates, they will be light-skinned, because he does not think that black-skinned, dark-skinned people are worthy.
It breaks my heart that these black women are going at it, and they blame men. But if you're going off of who Lil Wayne puts in his video as your source for your hatred for women who are light-skinned, there's something wrong with you.
To say that dark-skinned women bully light-skinned women, ask the question of why if you see that occurring. If you see that occurring.
Those darker skinned children were feeling hurt because someone told them that they're not worthy of this. And so they acted out and lashed out against it as children. As adults.
Hey, you don't have to be light-skinned to be beautiful. You should have darker skinned people on TV.
These beauty preferences that we have, they're not something we're born with. They're learned. And if they're learned, they can be unlearned.
I think privilege comes, I'm going to make a list. White, male, hetero, cis, able-bodied. Rich. Am I missing any?
All six.
That's it. And I think it's very important to know that people from any community could have any of these six, except the white one kind of varies.
Mm-hmm.
And it varies a lot, just because even though you could be a white Latino, there are just certain aspects. Then you have rich, again, that we all know that rich, that's like a controlled dice game.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have cases where we do have people of color who are rich, and that automatically puts them on a privilege, like Morgan Freeman, or Gina Rodriguez,
Mm-hmm.
America Ferrera, you name it. Beyonce, thinking here. Then you have able-bodied. I'm able-bodied.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren's able-bodied. That's a privilege in its own. I'm trying to think.
Being able to be identified as heterosexual is a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can identify that, but assumed heterosexual.
Yeah, exactly. Cisgendered.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very big privilege, and I don't think a lot of people realize that's a really big privilege.
Yeah.
I think another thing is to realize that you could be part of the LGBT community and be cisgendered. And then, yes, you are part of the LGBT community, but you have a privilege that probably other people do not have. And then whiteness is the strongest privilege, I feel, at times. And male privilege. Because you could be a Latino male, you could be a black male, you could be an Asian male. You are male. You're here, and you have advantages that women don't have, that LGBT people, non-conforming, don't have. That's privilege.
White privilege is definitely a phenomena. It's definitely a factor of life, but there's privilege across the board. So for white people to get very anxious and very upset or disappointed about them having privilege, and they almost feel like they didn't earn something. You're trying to say that like you're devaluing their progress in life, their accomplishments. No, it's not the case. Everybody has had a privilege in some sense. I definitely have privileges of my own. I'm able-bodied. I'm cisgendered. Those are privileges. You know, I know there's not challenges that I have in my day-to-day life of getting up the stairs of this library that the next person could have. So it makes my life a lot easier in my studies at the University of Hartford. I don't have to go through those extra steps. So when you're white and you have certain privileges, just understand the lesser steps you have to take in life and just own it. Own it, move on. You don't have to apologize. You don't have to explain. Just be aware. And don't make stupid comments about, well, you should have been able to. That's like me jumping in a swimming pool telling somebody in a wheelchair, well, you should be able to do this lap. What sense does that make?
I think it is a term that many people have a very poor understanding of what it actually means. And it doesn't mean that every white person sort of benefits in every way in our society. But I think it's a term that really helps to understand how even those things that you may not think are sort of beneficial to you may in fact give you opportunities and chances that you haven't necessarily earned. And so that neighborhood you grew up in with those really great schools and that you are able to benefit from just because of the accident of birth.
To me, white privilege is unearned advantages that you get just by people having positive connotations with your racial group.
I think you, as an individual, not living and not worrying about opportunities being taken away from you because of your ethnic background or race, losing jobs because of your hair, ethnic background or race, you getting into schools, all these things is part of white privilege. You not worrying whether or not you're going to make it back home at night because you don't know if the cops are going to kill you in your car on your way to the store. That is white privilege. Your parents not telling you not to speak Spanish outside of your household, that is white privilege. Because they're afraid that you're going to get harassed or even killed. That is white privilege.
Your parents having to sit you down and having the race talk, I'll call it race talk, that's privileged. It shows up in so many forms.
And I forgot Christianity. Being a white Christian male, you have white Christian straight male. You have unbelievable power that none of us ever in a lifetime will ever get to see.
I'm obviously more privileged than, I'm straight, I'm Christian, in a society that thinks those things are better for some reason. So like I am aware of it, but I don't know how to like not be straight or not, so I don't know. I just, it's sort of one of those things where like I'm aware of it and I'll use it to help if I can, but like more often it's the things that I'm not privileged about that I notice, which I guess is sort of how white people feel.
I think it's really, really frustratingly hard to get white people to. I don't even really think anymore that it's see it, because I think they see it. But to admit it and to really think at a deep level what that means.
I mean, the sense of privilege is that it's unearned. And, you know, as a white male in American society, there's certain privileges that are extended to me that I didn't earn. You know, the privilege of being treated like an individual, being viewed as trustworthy, not being profiled when I walk in stores. You know, your history, your literature is at the center of society. And that whiteness is often centered in a way.
I think if everyone was aware of what was going on, whatever it may be, it'd be a lot easier to like revert back to your 5-year-old self and be like, would my 5-year-old self think this was right or wrong? Because our 5-year-old selves are really good at that.
Is reverse racism real? That's a great and very common question. No. I don't believe in the tooth fairy either. I know that's being a little glib. I mean, I would argue, and I've actually written an article called "What is Racism?" I would argue that racism are acts and actions that work to maintain a system of racialized oppression. And I don't think that there's a systematic way in which whites are being oppressed by African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans in the United States.
I think that cultural appropriation is very different from the concept and the fallacy of reverse racism. I think, you know, cultural appropriation is here, the fallacy is over here. Because with reverse racism is something with power. Who holds the power in every situation. Mm-hmm. It's not us, people of color. And then when we talk about cultural appropriation, I mean, like the example of the Kardashians, I personally feel like Kylie, with the whole news article of her being the new Latina or the mix of all the Latinas, you want our body type, you want our lips, you want our hair.
Don't want it on us.
And you don't want it on us, but you don't want the struggles that come with it. You do not want our history. You do not want the struggle of our ancestors weighing on your shoulders. You don't want that, but you want the sexual part of it all. You want the attention part of it all.
It's not reverse racism. I mean, like in the college terms, plagiarism is considered an offense, right? You'll get tossed out of college. Why isn't it the same issue of cultural appropriation? You are plagiarizing somebody's culture for all intents and purposes. It's fine to cite and quote and use and appreciate. That's perfectly fine if you agree with this type of artist's artistry and you like the culture that comes with it. It's more than fine. I think it's a hell of a lot better than you telling me that my braids are inappropriate for an office space and I need to go home and fix that. Now, if you come home after your vacation from Jamaica and you got cornrows, don't just say, oh, these are rope braids. Learn what you're using. Understand it. Respect where it's coming from. Done.
Suppose I could have stayed home and baked cookies and had teas, but what I decided to do was to fulfill my profession, which I entered before my husband was in public life.
So it's very important to me. Look, I want to see an honest press. When I started off today by saying that it's so important to the public to get an honest press.
The greatest single thing, in my opinion, that she's ever done is to get out of the email problem. I think it's incredible. She did a great job on that.
What difference at this point does it make? She could be the first. I said it in my final thoughts last week. It's not good enough to be first. You have to do something. We had a first 8 years ago, and I don't know about you guys, but it's not working out.
Jaguars owner Shad Khan also joined his players on the field. The kneeling was in response to comments made by Donald Trump over the weekend about those who protest the national anthem. It was also in solidarity with Colin Kaepernick. No NFL team picked up his contract this season, with some NFL
Really happened. It's called radical Islamic terrorism.
Able to talk about how a non-intersectional framing of class contributed to this moment.
Oh, he brought out the true colors of the United States, most definitely. Racism did not come about November 8th of 2016. I'm sorry, it didn't. It's always been here. It was here when Obama was president. It was here when George Bush was president. It was here when Washington was president. You know, this isn't new. The United States foundation is white supremacy. That's what it is. The Constitution is a very good example. Bill of Rights is a really good example. History is a very good example in general. Just Donald Trump, what he did was he gave people confidence. He gave people a little bit of confidence that what they said in their bedroom, now they will tell you to your face.
I think it revealed racism that already exists, clearly. In some people, they felt emboldened just to say what they already thought. I think that is true. I think maybe I'd regret this statement a day from now, and I thought more about it, but I think in some sense, for me, what I think is particularly intriguing, and I hope potentially good in the end as this plays out, I think it's really exposed the racism of the Republican Party.
He's definitely done both. Just as I discussed previously, there were two ways of people who were heavily affected by Trump and feed into this racial tension. There's a group of people who believe that everything was fine because Obama became president and that there's no more need for resistance and to continue on the efforts of equality. And there are the group of people who were looking to prevent equality and go back to a time where they were more superior or felt so through the law.
What I think is interesting about the Trump phenomenon is since the civil rights movement, we've made it not nice to be overtly racist in public.
I think it put, racist ideas, not that people weren't prejudiced before, but it's sort of named race as the problem for things, real things that people were suffering with. There is a lot of suffering among the white working class, particularly because of economic changes, because of all sorts of things. So there's real things to be frustrated and angry about and not feel represented and feel like your jobs are threatened and real. And I think for a lot of those people, there is a concerted effort among Trump and his whole campaign and to just gather those people up and direct their anger, right, on racial, ethnic lines.
So, the most common frame now that you hear is this election was about class, not about race. This election was about losses suffered by the working class. Well, of course, if class was the same set of experience across all different groups, you wouldn't have had such a split between white men and black women. When we're talking about class, there's a class division right there. Obviously, what's happening is people are framing class in a singular biographic frame, basically white men. And they're not taking into account, in fact, even the effects that people are saying contributed to this are far more significant in the lives of black women, in the lives of people of color, loss of economic security, all of the things that people say contributed to it actually were happening among the people who voted the most against Trump.
Donald Trump has exposed the people who feel this way and feel like we need to go back into chains. We need to go back to where we came from. We need to go back to the Congos of Africa. That's one group. And then there's another group who wasn't necessarily thinking like this, but does question how my people's advancements have led to your people's disadvantages.
And like I said previously, racism manifests itself to the society that it's in.
America's true colors have always been there. And what we're seeing today and what Trump is really a manifestation of is white backlash. And whenever whites have felt threatened, and this goes back hundreds of years, they've doubled down on the race card and used and worked against the idea of the other as the threat, the explanation for their problems. I mean, it was done, there was a backlash in response to the civil rights movement, there was a backlash in response to immigration, there was a backlash in response to the end of enslavement, there was, that's been a part of American history.
One of the things that I find really interesting, out to everybody, but when we talk about politics and candidates they're going to vote for, that I have so many people that I surround myself with, or I'm surrounded with, say that thing of I support gay rights, but I'm still going to vote for this person. And when I say, but that person wants to take away my rights or not give me rights, and I'm your friend. So how do you justify that you can do that? That they can easily sort of shrug it off as you're taking it too personally. Right?
That's part of that's a class issue, it's a race issue, it's a gender issue. There's an awareness of vulnerability coming not just from a lost expectation. This is something that Tim Wise talked about. It's not just loss, it's loss against a backdrop of expectation. So he talked about white nationalism having created a set of expectations about what is supposed to happen to me and what is not supposed to happen to me. And when certain things start happening that go against that grain, Luke Harris calls it diminished overrepresentation. You think you're supposed to have 100%, turns out you only have 90%. So that leads to the resentment, the anger, the righteous indignation. You have other people like Black women. The expectation is always forward-looking. It's always, how's my life going to get better? It's not, this wasn't supposed to happen to me. So I think they just came into it with a very different set of expectations that then played out differently in the ballot box. That's the kind of thing that an intersectional analysis brings to the table.
They were on board with the program. They were on board with what he's saying. I mean, they may make a face and say he's being blunt, but I don't think you can support him and not own what he's been saying.
So he's done both inciting and he's done both of exposing.
No, I didn't think Donald Trump would win, but I did respect it. Not respect him winning. Respect it in the fact of, like in 2015 when he started campaigning, people were like, oh, this is a joke. That shit's not funny.
Well, partly I have to admit that at some point, relatively early in that night, I just turned off the TV because it became clear when I saw Rachel Maddow, this look of sheer devastation on her face, probably really early on, I think around 7 o'clock, I was like, oh no.
When he first announced his candidacy, I was really frightened because I saw elements of, the elements of fascism and the populist movement in the claims he was making, the way that he was talking about Mexicans as being rapists and murderers. I mean, to me, that really reminded me of Hitler. And, I said that when a lot of people were just laughing at Trump, saying, oh, he's a buffoon, a reality TV star, he's not going anywhere. Did I think way back then that he was going to outgun the Republican establishment and the Democratic establishment and become President of the United States? I would have to say no.
He creates events for people to worship, and you see him, he's just like, it's like really on a Hitler level. He's obviously not on Hitler's level. I'm not giving any love to Hitler, but let's keep it real. He's a buffoon.
I really don't like the phrase of if you didn't vote, then you don't get to complain. Because then I start thinking about historical context of all the people who didn't have the right to vote, but still needed to complain to get the right to vote. So therefore, all of a sudden, I feel like that phrase is debunked.
The media needed to take at least part responsibility for giving him a voice for so long and not do, to my perspective, not doing their job, which is letting the American people know all of the lies that they were being told. I think they really, because it was entertaining and because maybe some of them didn't think anybody could believe it anyway, just really dropped the ball on, fighting for. There's difference between factual information and non-factual information. And
I thought he was a threat to get the Republican nomination before he did, and I thought that to run against him, that Hillary Clinton was a very flawed candidate in terms of her past.
Shame on you, Barack Obama. It is time you ran a campaign consistent with your messages in public.
They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about
Hillary. Never was, and not ever. I never will. Because Hillary is the perfect example of colorblind racism and colorism.
Mm-hmm.
And if she would have won, we would have still been in the same cycle that we were in. The quiet one, the racism that goes over your head, the racism that you really have to scrutinize to see and ask yourself, was this racist?
After decades of voting, sometimes I feel tired of voting for the lesser of two evils. To be honest, I stood in the voting booth for 5 minutes before I could bring myself to put an X down for Hillary Clinton.
I don't think he's going to get impeached because, again, I think it's a structure. We're looking, he has money, he has fame, he is white, he is Christian, he is a man, he is heterosexual. No, I don't see him getting impeached.
I didn't see any chance of that happening. I think the Electoral College should be abolished. I think the president should be elected by popular vote. But it's really a effect of some of the constitutional compromises, like the Senate, that really, in some ways, give white Americans a disproportionate political influence.
I don't think it's going to matter in a way of reversing the election anymore, but I think it's partial. At least I think it's true that without Russian interference, it probably wouldn't have happened. And if we could prove that, I'm interested that we do prove that. What they would do with that, I don't know. But yeah, those electoral close ones, places where those votes were close and where there's reason to question the accuracy of those vote counts. Yeah, I wasn't overly hopeful, but
I think a lot of the people who are calling for him to be impeached are wasting their time. They should be organizing against the policies. If he's impeached, then you have President Pence. Somehow that makes me feel a lot better. I don't see that as something that's worth fighting, spending capital on.
What is apolitical? Everything is political. Everything is political.
I think that's what people don't get, is that every decision that we make is a political decision. It really is, every single one.
But even people making the statement of, I'm choosing not to be political, that is a political statement. Like, the fact that we're sitting here and you could upload this online is political. It's politics. I think people should be more involved in the political process. But they are involved in the political process. Mm-hmm. They should be conscious about being involved in the political process, about wanting to be involved in the political process. Because when you start breaking down and you see, whoa, the reason why I'm sitting here at this time and I don't have a curfew put by the government is politics. The reason why I could eat and have this meal is politics. The reason why I could go to the supermarket and use my SNAP benefits to get some fresh food for my family is politics. All of this is politics.
It's not just black people who think he's racist. Racists think he's racist. That's why they call him one of their own. Why? We made it. We're making America great again.
A friend who recently passed away, a family friend who was an anti-racist. He was in his early 90s, someone I just tremendously admire, just fought the fight his whole career. He never would describe himself as not being racist. He always described himself as a recovering racist. And said that you have to fight the battle against racism and sexism and homophobia one day at a time.
When people say I'm going to be apolitical, they're referring to like the straight left or right, and that's or seeing that as being laborious to get involved in all of it because it's a lot of information. It is. It's a lot to take in on the daily, and
It can be very overwhelming.
And I get not wanting to take in everything all at one time. I understand that because you're not going to be able to. There's not enough hours in a day. But being conscious of how the decisions that you make or people are making for you or people around you are being hurt, you have to be aware of that. And having the ability to say, I'm not going to be involved in politics, that's a privilege in itself. And you'll want to get involved in it once it's you that's being hurt.
I think it can be unlearned. I don't think it's easy, and I think how easy it is depends on things in people's background.
It's like recovering from alcoholism. You take it one day at a time. I slip up. I know there's moments where I say things that are just like, and it leaves my mouth, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Let me correct this. Let's walk this back. I get that was wrong. Here's maybe another way I can phrase this that it's not offensive. You know, you got to work through it.
There's, a tremendous amount that I've had to unlearn. Teach myself, if you say, my doctor, I don't automatically think of somebody who looks like me in a white coat, but I could think of an Indian woman or a black man or someone else. There are all sorts of ways in which the racism and sexism in our culture gets inside our heads, and we have to, in some ways, decolonize ourselves.
So it's the opposite for people who say can't change. That frustrates me. Students say that a lot to me. You're never going to change, right? America's racists are always going to be racist, and you can't change people's mind. I mean, to me, it's like, well, okay, let's just all go to sleep and give up then. Like, I just don't see the point of that. One, as a sociologist, I don't think it's true. As an educator, I don't think it's true. As a first person who knows anything about history, I don't think it's true.
That's hard. Racism is interlinked with many things. If you kill racism forever, that's going to impact capitalism severely. If capitalism is impacted, that's going to hurt the gender divide. Heteropatriarchy is going to be all screwy. If heteropatriarchy is screwy, then, this gender binary thing is going to be all messed up. It's going to be messed up. And, sexuality is going to run rampant, and I'm going to be here for all of this.
As the country becomes majority people of color, we better talk about whether the majority of the country is actually included in our solutions.
If there is anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible, who still wonders if the dream of our founders is alive in our time, who still questions the power of our democracy, tonight is your answer.
It's time to shake things up a little bit, and no, racism won't just end magically, but at least we're at a point where people are vocalizing.
The answer told by lines that stretched around schools and churches.
I don't think racism will ever end. Because I think that there's too many people who are complicit and comfortable in the status quo. And even when we're combating racism, to some degree, I feel like we're not doing enough.
It can never end completely. If by completely we mean that there won't be any racist, sexist people out there. I don't think we can, and I don't think that's practical, and maybe on some level it could only happen by forcing people to be a way that they're not, which I'm not in favor of. You know what I mean? Like, you can't mind control people that much. But in terms of it, equality being sort of, to me, what it means, right? Racial, gender, right? All equality being firmly embedded in the culture and structure of our country, I think that's a realistic goal.
I think if we educate them all and we sort of start from the bottom and build up this new community of people who are not about it, then it should go away.
It's the answer spoken by young and old, rich and poor, Democrat and Republican, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, gay, straight.
I think one thing is I would like to hit on is that Latino is an umbrella term. I think that people need to understand that my community, being the Puerto Rican community, has different needs from the Mexican community, from the Ecuadorian community, from the Chilean community. We have intersecting struggles, yes.
Disabled and not disabled, Americans who send a message to the world that we have never been just a collection of individuals or a collection of red states and blue states.
To give up is not an option.
Just again taking these social constructs and just blowing them up.
Recognizing them as constructs.
Exactly.
They're not real things.
They're not real things. This is literally a concept that society agreed on.
We actually need to see the benefits in all our people.
But I think if we could, if that prejudice didn't have power anymore, then it would make a difference. Then it would make a shift. In order for that prejudice to not have a power, that means the entire system and structure has to be reworked.
We are and always will be the United States of America.
you.